A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming out to explore with us the marvels of this utterly extraordinary opera. I'm Jessica Duchen. I'm a music journalist and I write about music in all manner of permutations. This is one of my favorites. It's a great pleasure to be here tonight with these wonderful performers, Backhouse, Julian Debreuil, and at the piano, the heroic Vann. So what we're going to do is, in this first half, we have an introduction. I'm going to talk you through the composition of the opera, how it came into being, why it came into being, and something of what the mysteries of it are. And then in the second half, we'll have a complete performance. So the first thing we hear in this opera is a prologue. What does it mean, ladies and gentlemen? The music begins, the flame burns, the legend is told again. The curtains of your eyelids are raised. These words are part of that introduction to this work, which is one that has an exceptionally dark and strange reputation in the operatic repertoire. It's fair to say that what awaits us tonight in Bartok is not exactly like Puccini. And perhaps no opera that overtly asks you, what does it mean, ladies and gentlemen, is actually about to go and tell you. We each, in the end, have to work out Bluebeard for ourselves. But having so said, I hope that I can offer you a kind of Michelin guide to it tonight, with a few things to think about, listen for, and consider during and after the performance. This isn't opera as we generally expect it to be, and not only because the cast is small and the work relatively short, 1 hour in length. It's not about plot in the usual sense. Not very much actually happens outwardly. It's closer to a type of psychological drama, or even a symbolic ritual. The drama is internal. We are walking not necessarily through a series of rooms, but a series of inner worlds, hearing not action, but emotional states. And just because there are only 2 singers, that doesn't mean there are only 2 characters. There is a third, the bard, who speaks the introduction, though sometimes he is dispensed with while Bluebeard, or sometimes even the conductor, takes on the task. And there's one further character too, the castle itself. A castle that weeps, sighs, and bleeds, perhaps more than its owner does. All of this we hear evoked in the orchestra, or tonight on one very beautiful Steinway. Duke Bluebeard's bride, Judith, demands to learn the secrets that lie behind the 7 doors of the castle. As she opens each in turn, the tableau becomes more terrifying. Ultimately, she falls victim to the final room, which hides his past loves. As it draws upon symbolist and psychoanalytical influences, the layers of meaning become personal and different for every listener. The twin shades of Richard Strauss's expansive and overheated writing in one of his masterpieces, Salome, and on the other hand, the concision of Debussy's language in his opera Pelléas et Mélisande are both powerful influences here. Still, the opera's enigmatic nature, rooted in the symbolist text, wears no thinner with time. The thing is Judith exploring Bluebeard's castle, or his mind, or perhaps her own, or even Bartok's? What sort of person can dream up and write down such an opera? Here's a vivid description of Bartok by his friend and patron, the Swiss philanthropist Paul Sacher. Whoever met Bartok, thinking of the rhythmic strength of his work, was surprised by his slight, delicate figure, He had the outward appearance of a fine-nerved scholar, possessed of fanatical will and pitiless severity, and propelled by an ardent spirit. He affected inaccessibility and was reservedly polite. His being breathed light and brightness. His eyes burned with a noble fire. In the flash of his searching glance, no falseness or obscurity could endure. If in performance an especially hazardous or refractory passage came off well, he laughed in boyish glee, and when he was pleased with a successful solution of a problem, he actually beamed. A more intimate description is given by Bartok's younger son, Peter, in his book about his father, which paints a wonderful, human, intimate portrait of Bartok the family man. He was deeply sensitive and passionate about nature, to the point that he wrote down birdsong and collected insects. He didn't drink, and he ate very simply. He was so light on his feet that his shoes lasted forever. In Budapest, he always preferred to take the tram and would only take a taxi if he was on his way to give a concert. He was constantly tormented by noise and thought the radio was the worst invention in the world because it devalues the availability of music and intrudes upon other people's oral space. I don't know what he would have made of mobile phones. Bartok himself wrote, "My true guiding principle, which I have been fully aware of ever since I have come upon myself as a composer, the ideal of the brotherhood of peoples, brotherhood created despite war and all conflict. It is this ideal which I work with all my power to serve through my music. This is why I do not avoid any influence, be it from Slovak, Romanian, Arabic, or any other source. The only thing that matters is that the source be pure, fresh, and healthy." He was, certainly to my mind, not just Hungary's greatest composer, but one of the towering figures of the 20th century. He was born in Nagy Szent Miklós in Austria-Hungary, now Romania, and his first music teacher was his mother. His early works were influenced by Brahms, Liszt, and Strauss, especially Strauss, but the music of Debussy made a profound impact on him when his friend Zoltán Kodály returned from Paris with some of Debussy's scores in 1907. Debussy's malleable, unconventional approach to harmony, his creation of atmosphere, and his magical way with timbre and colour proved transformative to Bartok's style. The following year, he and Kodály set out together to research Hungarian folk music. They toured the countryside, recording and transcribing the traditional music they encountered. Later, they used the material and its principles in their works. Bartok's compositions, however abstract, are deeply infused with the passion, the earthy rhythms, and the harshly beautiful contours of Hungarian folk song, and the intricate, unusual flow of the Hungarian language. This, too, was transformative. Hungarian is related to few, if any, other languages. It's ostensibly part of the Finno-Ugric family, but if you ask a Finnish person if they can also speak Hungarian, you may spark some derision, and likewise with someone Turkish. Hungarian has a sound that is both soft and flowing and rather astringent, and most of the time the stress is placed on the first syllable of a word. Bartok, rather like his Czech contemporary Janacek, used the rhythms and ebb and flow of speech to form some of his themes. And of course, this comes into the setting of words in this opera. Tonight, though, we'll be hearing it in English in a translation by Bartok's son, Peter. I found that going to Hungary actually enabled me to get Bartok properly for the first time. I'd always found him rather forbidding and unapproachable, but after I had a holiday in Budapest about 20 years ago, I then went home and listened to his concerto for orchestra. From the first notes, I felt as if I was back in Budapest, surrounded by those same rhythms, cadences, and atmospheres. But what made him choose Bluebeard as a subject for his only opera? The idea arrived when the poet and playwright Béla Balázs came to see him and read to him from his new play, or mystery play, as he called it, which was Duke Bluebeard's Castle. Born in 1884, so 3 years younger than Bartok, Balázs was a pen name. His real name was Herbert Bauer. He went on to become an influential figure in the film world, and he also provided Bartok with a complex, fantastical scenario for the ballet The Wooden Prince, the work alongside which Bluebeard was eventually premiered in 1918 as a double bill. Balázs left Hungary in 1919 and for 20 years lived variously between Vienna, Berlin, and the USSR. He worked in the early 1930s in Germany, contributing to filming Kurt Weill and Bertolt Brecht's The Threepenny Opera, and working with Leni Riefenstahl on a film called The Blue Light. Later, he was known as a film theorist, and back in Hungary after World War II, he founded a film aesthetics department at the Hungarian Academy of Dramatic Arts. His symbolist approach puts him in line with that influence from Debussy. And like Bartok, he was deeply attached to folklore. Balázs had dedicated this play, maybe hedging his bets a bit, to both Bartok and Kodály. The idea clearly was for one of the two to turn it into an opera. Kodály did not bite, but Bartok saw its potential at once. This is what Balázs said about his Bluebeard script. I created this ballad of mine in the language and rhythms of the old Hungarian Szekely folk ballads. In character, they very nearly resemble old Scottish folk ballads, but they are perhaps more acerbic, more simple. There is no literature or rhetoric within them. They are constructed from dark, weighty, uncarved blocks of words. Bartok's music also conforms to this. My ballad is the ballad of inner life. Bluebeard's castle is not a real castle of stone. The castle is his soul. It is lonely, dark, and secretive. The castle of closed doors. Balázs wanted to recreate not a fairy tale, but a psychological parable. Inner truth is greater than external action, and we're dealing more with archetypal characters than with rounded, humanly believable ones. In the spirit of those folk ballads, he wrote the libretto mostly in stanzas, using lines of 8 syllables. This gives a feel of stylized narrative to the action. It prevents it from ever feeling convincingly naturalistic. But maybe this is a work where we don't actually want naturalism. Its ethos of suggesting rather than stating, posing questions rather than answers, means that the libretto's format needs not to be too literal. Balázs had strong views on the staging as well. He intended the stage effects as light streaming from the 7 doors, each a different color, respectively blood red, yellow-green, gold, blue-green, white, darkening white, and moonlit silver. A typical stage direction from him reads, "The door opens silently and reveals a blood-red rectangle like a wound in the wall." At first, he had great respect and admiration for Bartok. He described him as a most moving and wonderful man. He possesses an incredible magical dignity. His figure, face, and movements are like a Rococo prince's, and yet there is a certain titanic dignity about him. A Rococo Titan. We can thank Ballas, too, for an unforgettable image of Bartok pursuing an unlikely-sounding trend, naturism. In 1911, the Bartoks, the Ballasses, and the Kodais all holidayed together in a somewhat Spartan nudist colony at Weidberg, Switzerland, while Bartok was hard at work on this opera. Ballas observed the composer concentrating on its score in the solarium, clad only in sunglasses. Ballas and Bartok were good friends until the premiere of Bluebeard, after which they fell out badly. The music was fairly well received, but the words were not, and Bartok omitted to credit the writer in an article he wrote about the creation of the opera, which was rather unworthy of him. Ballas thought Bartok was thus trying to curry favour with the critic who had written the negative review. That seems unlikely because that just wasn't the person Bartok was, but one way or another, their trust was broken. The moral of that story is always, always, always credit the writer, please. Eventually, Ballas put the knife in his own libretto, acknowledging it was not suitable for an opera because essentially there was no action, only the psychological interactions of two people. Bluebeard is a striking choice for a symbolist creation, however. The legend is ancient, and it went back in one form or another to biblical times and existed in many different versions. One theory for why Judith is called Judith is that it's a reference to the biblical story of Judith and Holofernes, where incidentally she beheads him. The best recognized version of the actual Bluebeard legend was set down by the French author Charles Perrault and published in Paris in 1697 in a volume devoted to ancient stories. It's well enough known to have given rise to a verb, bluebearding, which describes the crime of either killing a series of women or seducing and then abandoning them. In Perrault's version, Bluebeard goes away, leaving the keys of the castle with his young bride, but forbidding her to enter one underground room. She invites her sister and other relations over for a party, but in the middle of it, she succumbs to her curiosity and unlocks the forbidden door. There, she finds the carcasses of Bluebeard's previous wives. When she tries to flee, she can't wash the blood off the key. Bluebeard returns early, finds it, knows what has happened. He threatens to kill her too, but she pleads for a last prayer together with her sister, which he grants. In that time, their brothers arrive and kill him. She inherits the lot, deals with the gore, uses the money well, and marries someone nicer. A version in Hungary that Ballas and Bartok would probably both have known is called Anna Molnar, and it is fairly close to Perrault in that Anna kills her murderous lover before he can kill her, and she successfully wins the day. I hesitate to say that they all lived happily ever after. There are different ways and means of viewing the Bluebeard story. Is this a moralizing anti-feminist tale in which curiosity kills the cat, instructing wives to be nice and submissive and obedient to their husbands, lest they find something they don't like? Alternatively, is the bride the powerful one who can punish his crimes, maybe aided and abetted by her siblings? Or is he the outsider, the suspicious, different figure who is destroyed by the tribe? Feminist writers such as Angela Carter and Joyce Carol Oates have mined Bluebeard for its symbolism. In Angela Carter's story, The Bloody Chamber, the bride is rescued, not by her brothers, but by her mother. Other Bluebeard operas are also not short on the ground. One of the great influences on this one is, of course, Debussy's Pelléas and Mélisande, perhaps the ultimate symbolist opera. In its enigmatic story, a mysterious young woman marries the local castle's proprietor, but then falls in love with his brother, Pelléas. They exchange their passion only in the most innocent of ways. But ultimately, her husband kills Pelléas, and poor Mélisande dies in childbirth. The author of the play on which that is based, Maurice Maeterlinck, was perhaps the supreme symbolist poet in the movement's heyday in the late 19th century. He lived in a mysterious castle of his own, a palace on the French Riviera set into the cliffs. Maeterlinck was somewhat obsessed with Bluebeard, and his play Ariane et Barbe Bleue was the basis for an opera by Paul Dukas. His story gets the seven doors over and done with in Act 1, and then devotes another 2 acts to Ariane's interactions with the other ex-wives, whom she's discovered living behind the last door. He even names the ex-wives. Mélisande is one of them. One thing I really admire about Bartok and Ballas's version is that there's no moralizing. We're free to interpret the goings-on for ourselves and judge them if we must, but we don't need to judge them at all, just to observe and to reflect. The opera doesn't punish Judith. It also doesn't vindicate her. She's not necessarily a victim, and Bluebeard is not necessarily a monster. It appears he has not actually killed anybody. The legend has been transformed. It's gone from a potential crime story to an emotional standoff, and from cautionary tale to psychological allegory. Let's take a closer look now at the piece itself. First, we hear that mysterious prelude in which the bard asks us to think about what we're about to experience. Then the music begins. The key is F sharp, which comes to symbolize darkness. Throughout, Bartok is using a structure of symbolic keys to highlight the contrasts in the story. The first notes of Bluebeard creep in on the lower strings underneath the speech of the prologue, and they bear a more than striking resemblance to the opening of Pelléas et Mélisande. Indeed, except for being in a different key, they're almost identical. Someone once said, I think it was possibly Stravinsky, that great composers don't borrow, they steal. The setting is the castle, described as empty, dark, and forbidding, like a cave hewn in the heart of solid rock. Bluebeard and Judith arrive, and we learn that she has run away from home to be with him. How dark and damp it is here, she notices. The castle walls are weeping. They emit a sighing noise that is like nothing else in the whole of the operatic genre. Judith sees the seven doors and wants to open them because she wants to open everything, to let in the light and the air, to heal the sorry place. Bluebeard objects, but upon her pleading, he gradually furnishes her with key after key. The first door opens onto Bluebeard's torture chamber, its walls running with blood. It's tempting to wonder why Bluebeard has a torture chamber. Who has he tortured in here? Or is it perhaps he himself who has suffered torture within these walls? Here is how the first door opens. Next, Judith discovers the armory, bathed in a yellow-green light, but again stained with blood, indicated when a shrill, dissonant motif cuts across the glistening atmosphere. This motif will return time and again as each door reveals something more about Bluebeard's bloody past. As we move to the third door, Judith is gaining hope. This one is magnificent, the treasury. And the fourth moves towards greater lyricism with the beauties of Bluebeard's garden. Is there a beautiful side to this man after all? But even here, there is blood staining the jewels, soaking the flowers. And then, in one of the most striking moments of the opera, Judith opens the fifth door and sees Bluebeard's kingdom spread out before her. Here's what happens. Judith stands astounded in front of this blaze of light, a bright C major. In the harmonic system, this key is the polar opposite of the F sharp of darkness in which the opera began. The quietness of her voice shows us how awestruck she is, and yet the triumph is extremely short-lived. The blood motif is still about to return. Bluebeard would like to stop things there and keep their relationship at this point without any further revelations. But there are still 2 more doors, and Judith presses on despite his protests. She's determined to know all his secrets. The last of my doors must stay shut forever, he warns her. Ask no questions. She asks in any case. Defeated, he gives her the 6th key. Behind the 6th door, Judith finds an eerie, still, pale lake. It is, Bluebeard tells her, a lake of tears, the waters of buried grief. The atmosphere seems filled with broken sobs. The openness of the music begins to turn inward again. Here's what happens. Judith can't stop now. Only one door is left, and she's sure she knows what's behind it. The bodies of the former wives whom Bluebeard, according to legend, has murdered. She must see for herself, and Bluebeard finally lets her. A shock awaits. Behind the door are 3 women, all richer and more beautiful than she is, she's certain, and in fact, still alive. Bluebeard explains each of the women as they stand there, silent and idealized. They are his brides of morning, noon, and evening. Now Judith must join them. She is his bride of night. Judith pleads, to no avail. She's gone too far and is doomed to become a memory as well. He, yet again, realizes he can never find true love and must face eternal darkness. Bartok closes the circle, returning to the music, to the gloom from which it first arose. What does it mean, ladies and gentlemen? Asks the prologue. Obviously, this work means something different to everyone, and all we can do, ironically under the circumstances, is to try to unlock some of the mysteries contained in these musical chambers. Perhaps the most important thing is the characters, the nature of these 2 people. Feminist or anti-feminist, Judith can be seen as heroic. Equally, she could be seen as destructive. Either way, she is, in Ballas and Bartok's hands, anything but a naive young girl. She's a passionate woman who has taken her fate into her own hands and made a decision to leave her parents, brother and fiancé, to run away with Bluebeard, despite the malign rumors. And to her, loving him means knowing him entirely. She wants to throw open the doors and windows, let in the light, banish the damp and the blood and the tears. She thinks that exposing them will exorcise them. In short, she thinks that this will make Bluebeard into a happier individual. But we'd do well to remember the popular old joke about psychoanalysis. How many psychotherapists does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but the light bulb really has to want to change. Bluebeard doesn't. His understated interventions might suggest that he's perhaps the strong, silent type, or that he knows deep down that this love affair is as doomed as those of his past. Is he emotionally unavailable? Is he in a man cave, refusing to emerge and open up? Is this a high symbolist version, perhaps, of that old classic, men are from Mars, women are from Venus? Or are we looking here at some central questions regarding emotional intimacy? How far do we have the right to demand that our partner shows us their full self? Should we respect their secrets and leave them be? Can we ever know another person fully? What are we risking when we ask the hardest questions? Judith insists on total transparency. Bluebeard insists on maintaining his privacy. These stances are not compatible, and neither is totally comfortable in itself. If I pretended to know what it means, I think Bartok and Ballas would be quite annoyed. In symbolism, we can take nothing at face value. Everything palpable means something impalpable, opening like the layers of an onion to reveal 10 or 20 or 100 more beneath. We can throw into the mix a wealth of possibility. Whose head are we in, Bluebeard's or Judith's? Who's been tortured? What exactly happens in the orchestral climax after he designates Judith his bride of night? For she never speaks again. The options open to a stage director are infinite, and I've encountered a great range of them. Last year, when there was a concert performance at the Proms, the great Hungarian conductor Ivan Fischer gave an interview where he said that Bluebeard is really a pussycat who wouldn't hurt a fly, and is just a misunderstood man. Yet the legend of Bluebeard has him, let's not forget, as a serial killer. There have also been stagings that envisioned him as a Hannibal Lecter-ish monstrosity, even one that portrayed him as Josef Fritzl, the Austrian villager who incarcerated and abused his own daughter in his basement. Somehow that is rather too literal, almost too simplistic in a weird way in the context of the work itself. What seems extraordinary to me is that Bram Stoker's Dracula was published in 1897. Europe, indeed the whole globe, if you look, had been awash with vampire legends for centuries. Transylvania obviously being no exception. And one of the most powerful films to come out of the symbolist movement in cinema was Murnau's Nosferatu, the original vampire movie, which was made in 1922, only about 4 years after the premiere of Bluebeard. It seems bizarre that here is a story about a mysterious nobleman in a dark and forbidding castle, populated, moreover, by a number of undead brides. And yet opera directors just don't go there. At least I don't think they do. Maybe it's a bit popular for the supposedly rarefied atmosphere of the opera world, which actually is less rarefied than you might think. Anyway, ask anyone what they think Bluebeard means, and you get a different answer. To Peter Bartok, the composer's son, it was about memory and getting older, involving a middle-aged man's reluctance to accept the passage of time. He wrote, "As you move to the second half of your life, the ratio between memories and the future changes continually in favor of the memories. Perhaps Judith tries to make Bluebeard live in the moment, but he can't. He's trapped in the memories of his youth, doomed to live in the past." I asked our Bluebeard tonight, Julian, how he feels about it. In his view, it's about how people don't change. We fall in love with someone, but try to change them and fail. Most of us have been there at some stage of our lives. Or maybe someone else has tried so hard to change us that we have had to break off with them to our own dismay. We can look at Judith's demands that Bluebeard reveals his whole self and wonder if perhaps we can actually know too much about someone, for that is sometimes the point at which the illusion of love disappears. One way or another, the castle of the skull is scarred indelibly by experience, and you have to deal with that if you can. Now, says Bluebeard, it will always be night. One more thought. Bartok dedicated Duke Bluebeard's castle to his very young wife, Marta. If my husband dedicated an opera like this to me, not that he's a composer, I'd be flummoxed. What message is he sending? Perhaps there's been an autobiographical point to this opera all along. Maybe when Ballas first read him the play in 1910, Bartok saw its reflection in his own domestic circumstances. Here is part of a letter he wrote to his mother a few years earlier, 1905. I am a lonely man. I may have a few friends in Budapest, yet there are times when I suddenly become aware of the fact that I am absolutely alone, and I have a foreknowledge that the spiritual loneliness is to be my destiny. I look about me in search of the ideal companion, and yet I am fully aware that it is a vain quest. Even if I should ever succeed in finding someone, I am sure that I would soon be disappointed. He and Marta were married in 1909. She was one of his piano pupils. She was 16 years old to his 28. Here is a young wife wanting to know and love her mysterious, considerably older husband, who's deeply private and fears that her youthful desire to know his secrets will destroy their relationship. Bartok and Marta broke up about 5 years after the opera's premiere. That premiere came a good while after he finished his score. The manuscript was dated September 1911, but it wasn't performed until the 24th of May 1918. First, it was rejected in an international competition, and meanwhile, Bartok and Kodály both were finding it so hard to make any headway in career terms as composers that in 1912, Bartok withdrew from public musical life, keeping his position teaching piano at the Budapest Academy of Music, but otherwise devoting himself to ethnomusicological studies. Then came World War I, causing a time of great deprivation and considerable nihilism in Hungary. The country faced defeat, and at the Treaty of Trianon in 1920, the old Kingdom of Hungary lost a staggering 71% of its territory. Hungary is still trying hopelessly to get over this today. During the war, Bartok, who was very into clean living and nature, succumbed to an addiction, smoking. Because why not? Who knew if they would survive all this? He spent a bit of time composing, but it was only in 1916 that he finished another large-scale orchestral work, The Wooden Prince, that one-act ballet based on a libretto by Ballas. One-act operas are problematic to stage because they are short, and an audience expects to spend more than 1 hour in the opera house. You need a suitable companion piece to perform a double bill, and even these are apparently notoriously difficult to sell. From the start, Bartok had his eye on The Wooden Prince as that companion piece, and it worked. After the ballet's independent success in 1917, the two works were presented together the following year. It didn't make his fame and fortune. There was that old problem: nothing happens. Beyond Hungary, it was greeted with some incomprehension, bleak, unstageable, and in Hungarian. Over time, however, it's come to be seen as one of the greatest of 20th century operas, indicative of its time and place of creation, but far transcending both with its humanity and psychological acuity, the intensity of atmosphere, the originality of the music, and perhaps that lack of moralizing. All these make it a perennial work today, and the deeper our acquaintance with it, the more rewarding it can become. Tonight, try listening not only for the themes of the music, but for the color that it creates. Notice the intensity which scarcely found us, despite the lack of overt drama, and the way that for Bartok, silence and stillness are just as crucial a part of the music as the sound itself. Welcome to Duke Bluebeard's castle, and I hope that this has opened a few doors into its mysterious world. Thank you.